On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the Laker Mark W. Barker has run aground just off Belle Isle in Detroit. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to this episode. So I'm actually going to bring you over to a live feed right now of the Mark Barker, which is aground off Belle Isle. So this is the live feed from the Dossin Museum, Great Lakes Museum in Detroit, Michigan. So this is the Mark W. Barker, the newest ship in the Interlake steamship fleet. The vessel was outbound from Cleveland, had stopped in Detroit with a load of salt on board, was heading up to Milwaukee when the vessel appears to have lost power while transiting between Belle Isle and the Canadian shore. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, which has put out a Twitter on this, they said the ship basically was carrying salt and then had a soft grounding at about 8 a.m. this morning on this side of the bank. What you're seeing right here now, this is actually coming from the museum's webcam, which monitors the Detroit River. You're actually looking east here from the museum. Belle Isle is on your left. The ship is grounded onto Belle Isle. Across the river there is Canada. That's the south side of the embankment. The tug right here, this is the tug Pennsylvania that is on position. It's got a tow line on her, and they're not looking like they're trying to pull her off at this moment, but just hold her in position. She's got the stern thruster. It looks like she's kicking out her stern thruster a little bit to keep the vessel from coming sideways up against the beach. And that's the smart move right there. We don't know what has caused the Barker to lose power. She's a single prop vessel, about 8,000 horsepower, a little over 638 feet long, self-sustaining, bulk carrier, I said before, loaded with salt, was heading to Milwaukee. Probably what happens, in looking at her track from AIS Marine Traffic, she was heading at about 10 knots when all of a sudden lost power. It looks like the ship navigated itself to kind of beach it up against Belle Isle here. The issue with Belle Isle is going to be that the Belle Isle shore here is really rocky. So not exactly sure what this bow is sitting on at this time. So this was the track of the Mark W. Barker. She left Cleveland, docked in Detroit, and now this is after departing the dock in Detroit. She is heading outbound up into Lake St. Clair, heading toward Lake Huron. Here you'll see Belle Isle come into position. Ship is heading at about 10.5 knots. Seems to be her standard speed, when all of a sudden you'll see the speed drop speed, and the ship will basically maneuver toward the shore where the vessel is eventually beached up against Belle Isle. The current is coming from right to left here. So basically it is pushing to the left side of the screen because the Great Lakes pour out of the lakes. So Lake Huron would be to your right. Lake Erie is actually down to the left and down. And so what you're doing is trying to keep this vessel in position and keep the seaway open. And according to the Coast Guard, the seaway is still open, so ships are still being able to transit between here. This image is from earlier today, shortly after the vessel grounded at about 8 a.m. This is from Channel 4 in Detroit, their newscopter. They have this up on YouTube. And you can see the vessel beached up against Belle Isle. Kind of matches exactly what you saw in Marine Traffic. You'll see another Laker coming down right now, or excuse me, coming up the river, heading that way. You'll get a couple of good images here as they zoom in on the vessel. So a couple of things to notice. The Coast Guard reported the vessel has no pollution leaks. There's no fuel leaks. So there's no sheen or anything around the vessel, which is good, which means potentially the hull has not been breached. You'll notice the bow is a little higher up than the stern. Now, that could be because of the load on board, or more than likely, it has to do with the fact that the bow is resting on the bottom and is up higher from the grounding. They will not want to pull the vessel off very quickly because number one, you don't want to lose control of the vessel and have it go ashore in a worse position than it is, maybe going sideways to or the stern grounding. Meanwhile, on board the ship, they'll be sounding the tanks, making sure there's no flooding on board the vessel, make sure there's no leaking on board the vessel, and then obviously, of course, they'll try to correct the issue that caused this to happen in the first place. If they can't correct it, they'll get enough tugs so that they can pull her off the beach, or off the rocks actually here, and get her to a dock and manage her. They don't want the vessel obviously obstructing the way. You'll see that's a Coast Guard vessel that's monitoring the situation right now. You get a really good image here of how pronounced her bow is up versus the stern sitting in the water. This vessel was built in 2022 at Fincantieri's shipyard over in Wisconsin. She's the newest American laker in 35 years. First ship built for Interlake in a long time, named for a previous president of the firm. This is a family-owned generational firm. You'll notice that where she went ashore is a perfect spot. She didn't hit this concrete wall here, went ashore right along the shore here. This is a rocky shore, so you get a lot of rocks here, which means that rocks probably are underneath the vessel. That gives me a little bit of concern there that you could have damage on the bottom. Now, usually the forepeak, the very front of the vessel, doesn't have cargo or fuel or anything in it. That's always a good thing. You usually have a double bottom, which means you have a void space between the bottom of the vessel and the inner tanks. The inner tanks will have fuel typically on this. You'll see right here, you see there's a little bit of water kind of streaming around it. That is the current coming around it. You can see the current kind of spilling around the bow of the vessel here. That's not the bow thruster kicking. That is the current coming around the vessel at this time. Obviously, they want to remove the vessel with the least amount of damage possible. So again, not unusual for a vessel to lose power. One of the things that I did notice coming over here is that, for example, the radar is not spinning, which gives me wondering whether or not the ship has power or not. It looks like it has some, you see some wake coming past here, but again, I think that's current coming across right now. I don't know if the ship has any power on to kind of keep it up against the shore. It doesn't look that way. That looks purely like the current hitting the rudder going against it. You would want to basically, if they did have power, probably use the stern thruster to make sure the vessel doesn't kind of come off. Let's go ahead back to that live view for a second. Okay, here's that live view of the vessel. You see it's still basically in that same similar position. You can't see the tug Pennsylvania. She's off the starboard quarter, the right side of the vessel. She had a tow line on earlier to kind of keep the vessel off the shore and prevent it from going sideways. So the current is actually coming towards you in this image. The U.S. shore is on the left side of it. It's actually on the north side. And then the Canadian shore is on the southern side. It's a weird geographic feature here. But again, what you want to do is prevent this vessel from grounding. No idea what caused it. The Coast Guard is reporting that no pollution at this time. We will keep you up to date with this as more information comes out. I'm hoping to be able to catch the removal of the vessel when they pull it off. Again, expect that to happen within the next few hours once they get tugs on location and ascertain it'll be safe to pull the vessel off. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. This channel covers what's going on with shipping. We cover everything from global to inland waterways to containers to tankers to bulkers to maritime disasters and maritime accidents. You name it, we try to cover the gambit. If you enjoy this channel, subscribe, like, leave a comment. If you know something more about this, hey, leave a comment. The whole reason I know about this is because one of my viewers, Sean Quigley, big shout out to Sean. Sean gave me the heads up about this, so I was able to get the information and put it out there for you. If you got some information, please leave it in the show notes for it. Give it a thumbs up. If you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit that super thanks button down below or become a patron of the page by going on over to Patreon. Until our next video, this is Sal, signing off.